Welcome to another episode of Mission Compliance, unleashing growth potential for defense contractors. In today's episode, we continue down the road of understanding CMMC, its regulations, and controls. Up next is AC L2-3.1.12, monitor and control remote access sessions. Monitor and control remote access sessions. We'll break down what these controls mean, why it matters, and how it impacts your organization's cybersecurity posture. We'll also provide practical insights and strategies for achieving compliance and securing your systems effectively. So whether you're a defense contractor aiming to win more contracts or simply someone interested in bolstering your cybersecurity knowledge, you're in the right place. Say it louder for the people in the back. We're joined today by Mike Frieder, President of On-Call Compliance Solutions and a CMMC Professional Assessor. So, Mike, today we're talking about monitoring remote sessions, which seems pretty simple enough. And for those watching on YouTube, I have a microphone today, slowly but surely getting better every day. So today we're talking about monitoring remote sessions, and it may seem pretty simple, but why is it important to monitor these user remote sessions?
Yeah, so I know this control gets me every time because all the other controls are so long and verbose up until you get to Control 12 that you start reading and you're like, where's the rest of the control?
Oh yeah, you heard me stop. You heard me be like, oh, that's it.
Yeah. And congratulations on the microphone. I mean,
Hey,
just trying to make it a little more professional around here, a little more serious.
there we go.
It's what's funny is, I remember last year, I had put an additional studio in my home office. And I had the worst problem with audio. I just, I tried 3 or 4 different microphones, and you really need a full-size microphone to get decent clarity. Although I think I'm on a stereo webcam that's, a decent Logitech, pretty high level one. And I think the audio sounds pretty good, but man, nothing sounds like a real microphone. I mean, it just doesn't.
It's true.
So yeah, so in regards to monitoring and controlling remote access sessions, I think maybe this is one of the more understated controls. And the idea here is, when it comes to remote access, you need to know who's accessing your system. You need to be able to monitor that. You need to be able to find anomalous behavior before that behavior turns really sinister. And the key to doing that is to have some methodology for monitoring that. And so 3.1.12, it's only 6-7 words, but monitor and control, very important, right? You've got to be able to set the limits on what they can and can't do remotely. You've got to be able to know who is there and what they're doing and things like that. So it's an important control. There's a lot of things here in this control that are important. And I think, the best way perhaps to approach sort of explaining why you should be monitoring and controlling it, and not just, and here's an example of when you're not doing it, right? So sometimes the easiest way to explain something is to explain it backwards. So what is it like to not monitor and control remote access sessions? A great example of that is having a VPN that's always on, and that there's no sort of timeouts, there's no reason for the session to really be monitored. It's not being monitored, and so you could have somebody connected into your router with full access to your network and not even know that that's going on. That's obviously not good. We don't want that to happen. And so, when we go to the opposite of that, right, which is what the control mandates, we talk about the idea that you should be monitoring who is connected. You should have a user list of people and accounts that can access it. You should not just let everybody in the world remote in if they don't need that access. You should be able to monitor who's connected at any given time, and you should get probably an alert if there's some kind of an anomalous login, like something from out of this country. So these things do happen. As a matter of fact, we were just dealing with an incident, this morning, onboarding a new client. We haven't gotten them moved over to the Azure government environment yet. We haven't gotten all of our rules set up in the new environment, and their old environment had an email compromise. And luckily, again, we spotted it pretty quickly. We immediately locked them out, sort of re-secured the account and started having to set up some security rules on their old environment, which we didn't want to do. We were just trying to transition them out. But that's how frequent attacks happen. And that's also why it's so important to be monitoring those connections, because it just doesn't take very long for someone to be there doing it. But you will see the signs if you're monitoring. So for instance, the attack probably happened around, I don't know, beginning of July, and it's now towards the end of February, and that's when we caught it happening. So yeah, it's very, very real. It happens, and it's something that you just have to really, really work on putting some emphasis on keeping an eye on what's going on with your network. So that's what this is all about.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned VPNs, but if you're going to work remotely, or if you're going to work within a business environment at all, even though specifically this control talks about remote sessions, if you're going to work remotely, things like VPNs, multi-factor authentication, company firewalls, and SIEM solutions are crucial to doing so safely. So what are the key assessment points that an assessor would be looking for on this one?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's 4 assessment points on 3.1.12. Number one is determine if remote access sessions are permitted. So the first thing is, the assessor is going to need to determine if the remote access sessions are permitted. Does the organization really even have a concept of this? In most networks, that's going to be yes. We're really big into setting up Azure government environments where they can be safe and secure in what they're doing. And in that case, it's a cloud environment. So of course, remote access is going to have to be a must. So determine if remote access sessions are permitted. Again, the answer is going to be a yes or a no. There's not really a whole lot of detail you have to provide in that answer, which may surprise people. A lot of people, when they're writing their system security plans, think that they have to go into infinite levels of detail, but there are some yes, no questions. For instance, the next assessment point is determine if the types of permitted remote access are identified. And the organization really should be having some documentation on the various ways that it allows remote access. A great example is, again, another client that we're working to clean up at the moment has like 4 different methods of remote desktop access, none of which has multi-factor authentication on it, which is a big yikes to me, because that's 4 different gateways to monitor. That's 4 different methods of access to control. And nobody can really keep an eye on that many panes of glass, that many different places where an attack could happen. And so, reducing the attack vector from 4 potential methods in to 1 potential method in literally lowers your threat footprint by 400%. So you have to have those things documented. It's got to be something that you can show to an assessor and say, yeah, here are the types of permitted remote access. So it might be VPN and RDP. It might be VPN only. It might be, if you've got an IT organization helping you, it might be VPN and Splashtop. Whatever it may be is fine. You just have to document and giving a sample answer. Perhaps maybe your users who are operating remotely only need to get to files. We could say yes. The methods that are permitted are approved, and VPN is the only way in. That could be a sample answer. So again, it's really just confirming that yes, they've been identified, and what are the various types. Next assessment point is determine if remote access sessions are controlled. Now, this one is really tricky because you've got to know exactly how they're being controlled. So again, there should be VPN rules in a firewall, for instance, or again, wherever the VPN is created. You may have some of those rules that could be an Active Directory, right? You could have, for instance, if you've got a Sophos firewall and the firewall is pulling user credentials out of Active Directory, it could have nothing to do with Active Directory. It could have to do with the firewall's user access list, maybe separated. And do you have multi-factor authentication enabled like you should? Yes, you should probably list that there as methods for controlling the access. Another example is you can control access by various conditional access rules. For instance, you could say only people in the United States can VPN in. That's a really great rule because it literally lowers 90% of the potential attacks coming in. And yes, foreign attackers can use US proxies, but it is, a lot of the attacks are coming in from foreign IPs, and they're just these giant blanket attacks looking for a vulnerability. And so you kind of block out the potential for that and really lower the threat footprint. And that's what this is all about. So how do you control it? Lots and lots of different ways. But multi-factor authentication, if you've got Active Directory integrated with your VPN or maybe a different VPN user access system, access control lists, conditional access rules, You can even have pre-approved devices. You can have a rule that says, hey, unless the device is enrolled in Intune, well, then we can't allow it to use, connect via VPN, even if it's got great credentials. Lots and lots of different ways to control this. But boy, you've got to choose a few, and you really need to layer up that security and document here in the plan exactly how you're doing that. Final assessment point is determining if remote access sessions are monitored. This is so important. It's so many attacks could be prevented if they just had proper alerting and monitoring about what's going on, and an IT manager looks at these reports once a day. And by the way, huge tip out there, if your IT manager or IT person does not have a half hour to an hour a day to look at reports of what your system is doing, they need more time on their schedule, or you need to staff up. For a lot of business owners out there and a lot of managers, they don't really have a clue what the IT person does. And I think that's fair. The IT person should be justifying what they do via time entries in a ticketing system to show their boss how busy they are. If you want to prove to your boss all the great work you're doing, use your ticketing system, show them the time entry logs. If you're in a really, really small group of like 3 or 4 people, cool. Take your schedule every week and what you worked on, print it out, go give it to your boss. You'll be the best employee ever and probably be promoted to a manager very soon. That is, I just, again, nobody ever does proactive work. I'm going to tell you that for my team, when they do that, they prove that they're ready for management level. It's huge, 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 huge. And we tell them to do it, but when they can competently do it, that means they also know how to manage people and get them to do the same thing. So again, a half hour to an hour a day should be spent reviewing system logs to determine who's accessing what, where is there anomalous behavior. Why is that an everyday activity? Well, simple. You're definitely, as a company, you're definitely looking at your IT guy to provide security services, right? That's like the untold thing, right? Everybody in IT is looked at and they say, well, aren't you supposed to be preventing the IT problems? Well, no, if you're an infrastructure guy, your job's just to stand up the infrastructure. It's not security. If your job is to take trouble tickets, security's not in that, right? Unless there's an active security incident that you're responding to. So somebody in there needs some time to be able to do this monitoring. You need to demonstrate that we have people who can do that. So again, sample answer here, yes, remote access sessions are monitored via the SIEM firewall monitoring, and periodically during risk assessments, we're going to overview all of that stuff. Again, SIEM solution comes into play here, you guys. We need a SIEM solution, a security information and event management system. We're huge fans of Rocket Cyber. We're huge fans of Microsoft's Sentinel SIEM. Again, there's lots of different solutions out there. Every one of them's got a different price point, different functionality, things like that. But SIEM is so incredibly important, and it's going to again be a really big key to knowing when there's strange things going on in your network and permission escalations and odd connections and stuff like that. So again, if you're not monitoring that, you've definitely got to get that in place and get it monitored. It's a huge, huge piece of security. So that's what the assessors are looking for on this one, Roman.
Awesome, awesome. In many cases, you may not even be able to access company documents until you're connected to a VPN. So it's often hard to not comply with this one, and that's usually what I ask in this case, but in this instance I won't. Instead, to further clarify, because I know we've touched on this the whole time, but to further clarify, can you expound on just exactly what the risks are of not using a VPN or not using multi-factor authentication to further protect your data?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, I mean, VPN is kind of a functional thing, right? You need a VPN if you're going to remote access, but it does need to be properly secured. The disadvantage of not using a VPN is that it's an extra layer of security that essentially encrypts the communication back and forth. There are still attacks out there that can capture data, even in RDP sessions. There are numerous attacks out there that can be effective for publicly facing interfaces. And worse, and this is really the big one, if you don't have multi-factor authentication and also these technologies for remote access going on, and you get an internal computer that gets hit, and a lot of people will say that'll never happen to me. Well, the reality is you can't actually predict what your users are going to do. And we see it all the time. User gets, a user that doesn't have MFA enabled in their email account. Maybe they're in the middle of a transition. insert excuse here as to why that's happening, but their email gets compromised and all of a sudden, they're emailing every single coworker in the whole company, phishing emails, and it's really nasty. So again, I one is just system compromise. Two is just generally speaking, it is a huge danger to not have multiple layers of security because hey, if you get compromised, then well, we expose CUI and that's a problem. We got to go report that to the DoD and nasty stuff happens. And then of course, there's also just the obvious challenges of the more information they learn about your company, the better the attack they can execute you is. It's a social engineering attack, getting your accounting people to go send money to the wrong place and stuff like that. I always tell people that you should have 2 people involved in ever sending money out. If you don't have, if you've never seen an example of this in accounting, what we do is we have a bank account that's essentially empty, and that's the account that we send and receive money from, particularly sending money. There's no money in that account unless there's an intentional need to send that's been approved by at least 2 people in our company. Similarly, when you don't have those layers of security, it just makes it so easy to go and send the money or do things that are bad or give information away. So again, that's I think there's so many numerous dangers, but ultimately it is just a higher likelihood of an attacker getting in. And when they get in, the good news is if there is good news to being attacked, a lot of times they don't take immediate action. A lot of times they get into the account and they're waiting to see what in the world comes their way.
Exactly. And I suddenly caught a quick case of the hiccups during that last answer. So if that picked up on the podcast, I apologize. It's gone now. We're good. And Mike, we've been doing this long enough that our listeners know what's coming next. You know what's coming next. We all know what's coming next. We like to cut kind of the dryness at the end of the podcast with a silly question. And I gotta say, this one kind of made me laugh a little bit. Instead of using a VPN to protect myself and my business, while I'm browsing the internet, couldn't I just wear a helmet?
Sure, you could. I see no reason why not. If that's what you're into, that's what you're into. As I'm sure our audience knows, I happen to be a mega car guy and I'm into racing. And you know what? I have a driving simulator sitting across from my desk in my home office. From time to time, I go put on a race suit, I put on a helmet, I get into the simulator, and I put the virtual reality goggles on, and I go to town. And you know what? Sometimes it's okay to play dress up. I have an even better story actually. A much better story. I think this is going back probably 10 or 12 years. I was going to a client and we were going through the interview. It was back in our traditional managed IT services days when we still did that. I had a trainee with me and the sales interview type of thing, whatever you want to call it, pitch, was going pretty normally. And we're asking questions about their network and whatnot. And this guy just starts kind of going sideways and he starts kind of he starts kind of talking about like them and they are out to get me and all this crazy stuff. And, I eventually kind of figured out this guy's probably got a screw loose or 2, but in the passing by his office, which was essentially a room with a cardboard box that had aluminum foil all around it. I won't get into why but you can probably imagine there was an aluminum foil helmet that he had that he believed could shield his thoughts from they, them, whatever it is. And so I don't know what to tell you, Roman. Maybe if you put on a helmet, you will be safe.
Mike, that was exactly where I was going. Like you see all the TV shows, all the cartoons, and all the real life examples in that case of people being like, "Oh, I don't want aliens or whoever to steal my thoughts," or the government is listening, and they wear the tinfoil hats to keep their thoughts safe. So I don't know if a bicycle helmet would do much, and I don't know what it would do as far as the security of your data for your business. But hey, you might as well try, right?
That's right. And technically, you could use a helmet to protect CUI because there's only 2 ways to protect CUI. One is physical and then one is with encryption. So I suppose if you can't protect it with encryption, I don't know, put a helmet around it.
Or if somebody comes to your office to physically take the documents, you hit them with it.
That's right. Yeah.
You use it as a projectile.
Helmets are definitely not fun to helmets are definitely not what you want to be hit with. That is for sure.
No, absolutely not. Just ask the NASCAR drivers that get into fights after the race.
Oh my gosh.
They're
Or the
swinging
hockey
helmets.
guys.
Yeah, they're swinging helmets at each other. Oh, hockey guys, you don't want to mess with those guys. uh, and that wraps up another great episode of Mission Compliance. We hope our discussion today has provided you with valuable insights, practical strategies, and inspiration to navigate the ever-evolving world of defense. We'd like to thank Mike for joining us and talking about the importance of protecting your data. Thanks, Mike.
Sorry. So ironically, I had a VPN disconnect and reconnect on me. How funny is that?
That's funny. That's so we're doing the outro like normal, and ironically, Mike's VPN just disconnects.
That's it.
But
Am I supposed to say like and subscribe it yet?
no, not yet, not yet. But thanks for joining us to talk about the importance
Oh yeah.
of protecting your data using VPNs.
Always a pleasure, Roman.
But the conversation doesn't end here. We encourage you to continue exploring these topics and connect with us with our social media channels. Share your thoughts, ask questions, and engage with fellow listeners using the hashtag Mission Compliance Podcast. If you haven't already, now's your turn. What should they do, Mike?
Well, like, subscribe, and tell your friends. Join in the fun, and you know what? Come hang around for future versions of our podcast. We get better and better at it every week.
Interact with your on your favorite podcast platform. As Mike said, hit that subscribe button to be the first to know when new episodes like this one are released. We truly appreciate it if you could take a moment to rate and review the show. Your feedback helps us to continue to bring you thought-provoking episode and high-quality content. And I want to take this moment to point out that next week we reach episode 40. Can you believe that, Mike? 40 episodes of Mission Compliance.
Maybe I should hide my thumbs, but I can't hide them that way. 40.
Okay. 40 episodes coming up next week. You won't want to miss it. It's going to be a good one.
Wow.
Join us again on that next episode of Mission Compliance as we delve further into the dynamic world of defense, security, and industry innovation. Until then, take care, stay informed, and make compliance your mission. See you next time.
Thanks, everybody.